Hi everybody, my name is Marta Mama. I'm your basic queer bitch, and I'm super excited because today we're going to be talking about the first episode of Veneno, la serie. Woo. So, Veneno is a TV show created by Los Javis. You may be familiar with Los Javis because they were in the panel of judges of Drag Race España. They are Javier Calvo and Javier Ambrosi. And you have it if you live in Spain. You can watch it in AtresPlayer Premium. It's a subscription service by AtresMedia. And if you are in a different country, I think you can watch it in HBO Max. So, in case you haven't watched it, I want you to go and just watch it. Do whatever you gotta do, but just go and watch it. I'm going to just talk about it, but like for people who has already watched it, maybe you can watch this after each episode so you can kind of get what you weren't getting. So I'm super excited that this story is being like such an important international success. There's a lot of people that have been like talking about this TV show, like the cast of Pose or I don't know, all the Rue girls or RuPaul and Michelle Visage. A couple weeks ago, Gigi Good talked about like she decided to undergo some surgeries in order and Benino was a very important part in that decision. So I think this is like such a magical and such an important TV show that I don't really see many Spanish people explaining all this in English for you guys like to get. So that's what I'm going to try to do. And the reason why I think Veneno la serie is such an amazing success, first of all, is because like people from like my generation, we remember this. I remember this perfectly. So we all remember all this drama and this person. And another reason is I think that in the community, in the LGBT community in Spain, she was not very loved before this TV show. Like, first of all, you have to like keep in mind that she was like very openly a trans woman. And, you know, like in the 90s, it was not understood as we understand it today. It was understood like an extreme form of gay, something like that. Like they didn't understand back then the difference between your orientation, your identity, and your expression. So all of this like gets a little mixed up. So trans women were perceived as a joke. But this has happened in many other countries, and in the United States has happened as well, so on and so forth. So we can accept like LGBTQ people if they are like, again, a gay man that wears a suit and a tie and doesn't look like he's gay, but in the moment that you are more flamboyant, it's not that like well perceived by the public and by the rest of the LGBT community, because they're like, I'm trying to do something here. I'm going to try to prove a point. And then the more feminine you are, with this vision getting mixed, like orientation and expression and identity, the more feminine you get, the more like ridiculed you are, because you're seen as like the most disgusting thing a man can be, which is feminine, you know? So that was like the collective culture that we had in the 90s. You also have to keep into consideration that Cristina was, for many people in the community, she was a scammer, she was a liar, she was a very confrontational person. She was, in many instances, what we would consider today as transphobic, being a trans woman, but she didn't accept trans people that wouldn't like undergo surgeries, or she would feel like a trans woman that didn't have breasts wasn't a real trans woman. Like she had a lot of these things that are like very painful to listen today, but that's what she was taught to a certain extent, and you understand all the like surviving things that she had to do. So it is a difficult character to talk about. So that's one of the reasons this is like super interesting. And the other one is because how they chose to tell this story. So Los Javis are smart cuties, and they decided that we're going to have a lot of trans talent in the show. So the first step is like saying, obviously, every trans woman, every trans character that we have is going to be played by a trans actress, which is not the most normal thing around, but well, like Pose has done that. That's how it should be done. Cis people should not be playing trans characters, in my opinion. So that's the first thing they did. But then they took it a step further, and they said, we're going to have trans people in every single department of this show. In lighting, in makeup, PA, like every single department, there's going to be trans people. And this is like the gay agenda thing that a lot of like bigots talk about, like the positive discrimination and blah blah blah, working with a quota system. Like, I want at least a trans person for every single department. So they decided to do that just to prove a point, I guess. Not to prove a point, but because it was a perfect opportunity to do that. So the excuse people give is that, like, you should go by talent. You shouldn't get a job because you are a trans person, but because you deserve it. If you deserve it playing evenly with cis people, then you should get the job. But we never talk about like how many cis people get their jobs just because they are cis and not trans. We don't talk about the privilege that is being cis or cis passing in our society and the opportunities that gives you. So choosing to do this just to prove a point, I think it was very, very smart, because that was the key for the success of this TV show. Many of the trans actresses they had never done anything, like had never been an actress before. Daniela Santiago, Dana, this Veneno, the one that plays Veneno in like when she was so voluptuous and beautiful, she has never ever been an actress before. She was a dancer, she was a model, but she had never acted before. And we have like Paca la Piraña, who it was Veneno's best friend, and she plays herself. And we have like a lot of like trans talent that has never had an opportunity. But I want you guys to keep in mind that that's not only in front of the camera, that's also behind the camera. Hollywood, could you like take notes of how things should be done? Thank you very much. I also think it's very interesting how they chose to tell the story. It goes back and forth in time. There are like different like timelines, and they jump from one to another. The way they choose to explain what is fantasy and what is reality, I think is a very, very smart choice. It reminds me very much of like certain novels and writers. It's very much like Garcia Marquez, how he would choose to tell a story, how he would choose to mix like fantasy and reality. And you know, I think it's very interesting, all that. So I'm going to try to explain it how I see the show. We're going to start after this super long introduction. What's wrong with you, Marta? We're going to start with the first episode. That's the night we crossed the Mississippi. So the first thing we see is that this is 1996, Madrid. 1996 is the year I came back from the United States. I was 9 years old, and that was when I first arrived in Spain. And I was this child. that was supposed to be in bed, but was watching the TV, and they were watching like this beautiful woman on TV. We had this very interesting TV show called Esa Noche Cruzamos el Mississippi that you can see in the show. And it was like they talked about a lot of very, very like controversial stuff. It wasn't only like the stupid sexual fun things. They also talked about like true crimes that were happening, corruption schemes, or like different things, and also like the very funny, stupid, and a little bit like rancid and vulgar part. They also had that, so it was like very, very popular. It's a very interesting way of pulling the whoever is watching, they take you again. So that's the very, very first introduction that we have, is a little child watching this TV show. And if they ask any of us in Spain, that would be like the first thing we think about. So I think it's brilliant that they decided to start with that, because that child is every single one of us that are watching this TV show now. So I think that was like super cool. Second one, I'm already like into it. Like, yes, I know this feeling. I was there. I was this person. I think it was brilliant. And then you have like a black screen that says that tells you like a little bit that this story is about Cristina la Veneno, and it's going to be a mix of reality and fiction. But in every like real story, there are always lies, and in every fiction, there is always like a very important truth behind. And I think that is like so clever, so true, and that could come up from Garcia Marquez novel. The fiction can give you like truths that if you explained it just it is, you wouldn't be able to get or to perceive. So thank you very, very much for deciding to take that route. So now we have, during the whole episode, we're going to be going between 2006 and 1996. And there are certain like cues to let you know, well, which timeline we're going to. So the next scene is, you see, first of all, your visual cue is someone playing the snake on their phone. That's 2006. And that's like a very good way of explaining the time period it was, because that was very specific. And this second scene is the introduction of La Veneno. The way they chose to do this is that they did it in a very dramatic and epic way, with like a little bit of slow motion and the light behind, so you can only see her silhouette and this very recognizable voice. And it was like very epic the whole time. But what they did is they did like a little thing of humor. So she grabs his crotch area and he say, yeah, he has a good one. And that's like key. Like, we're going to give something super epic, and then we are going to give you like a tiny little bit of humor that it's going to make it even more believable, because in reality, epic things are like a little more stupid and less serious. So I think that's like a brilliant, brilliant way of introducing what the vibe is going to be with La Veneno. And then they have this song called Let Me Out by Dover, that is like a Spanish rock group that was very famous in the beginning of the 2000s. And they play in English, in case you're interested. And I used to listen to them too. But it gives like a vibe of a certain like age and time period and everything. And you see this like young Valeria hanging things on her wall. So this character, we know is going to be Valeria, but I just want you guys to notice that they never say her dead name, and they do that on purpose, and it is not important at all. And I think that was like, thank you very much for doing that. Lola, the actress that plays Valeria, is obviously a trans woman, and she had to like present mask to do this part, which can be like very difficult for some people. And yeah, so this is the introduction that we have to her. Her story, Valeria's story, is going to be like parallel to Cristina's story. So it's the story of two trans women. This is what the TV show is letting us know in chapter 1. They've introduced as an icon, as something that's very epic and also funny, the character of Veneno, and then they're introducing the character of Valeria. Valeria was the person who wrote Cristina's book, and I recommend that book to anyone that wants to read it. I don't know if it's translated in English, I guess so. She met Veneno before transitioning, and that was like a very important part for her. But the reason Valeria is in the TV show, it's not only because it makes telling the story a lot easier, because it makes sense, like all these time jumps, all these timelines make sense when someone is explaining their own story from the past. Like, it makes sense. Not only because of that, but because it gave the opportunity to have the two examples of trans women, what the trans experience looked like for many years. And Valeria is like the new generation that comes from parents who like accept her for who she is. So we're going to have like a very sad story for Veneno, and that's going to mirror into a very like happy and successful story for Valeria, because it gave the opportunity to give some hope. So when you watch Veneno, you have that like smile in your face, and that comes from Valeria. And it's the only way that this story that is super super sad is a little bit less sad, if it gets some hope, if you have like a younger generation of trans women who are being successful. So those are like the two main characters that are going to mirror each other throughout the whole 8 episodes. And then it's Madrid 1996. Visual cue is the set of Esta noche cruzamos el Mississippi and Pepe Navarro. Pepe Navarro is a very like recognizable character. He looks like this, and in the TV show he looks like this. The TV set is very similar, and it's very easily recognizable for every single like person in Spain. It's like if you see the set of like Jeopardy, or they have that like in the background just as a cue, but then they introduce the next female character that we have. In this case, it's a cis woman, and it's Faila Sainz. Faila Sainz was a journalist. She looked like this, and in the TV show, she's played by a very like famous and well-known actress in Spain. And there are like a lot of things going on behind the scenes that only makes sense if you know what was going on around the time. They're talking about Carlotti, they're talking about Mario Conde, they're talking about Las Mamachichas. And from like the very beginning, they are talking about women's struggles, about maternity, about having a job. They're telling like more stories about women, and the fact that they introduce problems of like cis women or straight cis women. I think it's interesting. Then we get like another time jump, and we are in Valencia in 2006 again, and we're hearing this song that is from the Cranberries, and it's called Dreams. And it's an older song, but it makes sense like in both timelines, because it was famous. It was like still famous in Spain in the mid-2000s. You see Valeria walking down the hallway of her university, and her expression of, hi, I want to be your friend, and like shy, and like what is wrong with me, and the otherness that she feels. You can really, really understand, I think, the trans experience growing up, just with that like way she walks down the hallway. And she's taking all these classes at university. She's studying journalism. And her friend has just seen La Veneno around Valencia. That was where they were living. She's super excited. They're talking about it. And Chenta, who is played by a guy that was in like Big Brother in Spain, Chenta, who is the other waiter in the Chinese restaurant, knows who Veneno is. So that's a way for you guys to understand that everyone knew who Veneno is. Everyone in the LGBT community, especially, because once like they know that Chenta knows who Veneno is, they immediately know that he is gay. And it sparks a conversation about sex work and survival sex work in trans people. And then we go back to 96, and the visual cue that we have immediately is like the fans, fangirling, how to take that concert, that was a boy band that was very popular around that time. And we learned that's like a little video that they are filming at the airport for El Mississippi, and they are choosing like what they're going to talk about. Here is where they talk about things that were happening on the news and TV personalities. And you can see a little bit about the personality of Pepe Navarro. Pepe Navarro was known to be difficult to work with. He was like a hard like boss, and it was like a little bit difficult to work with him. They give like a very romanticized version of Pepe Navarro, but well, it helps you understand him and not like hate him. And it also like explains you a little bit further about Faila's like struggle with her maternity leave and everything else. Then we go back to 2006, back or further to 2006. The visual cue that we have are these custom cars in Spain. They're like tuning cars, we call them, and they're all custom made with all the lights and all the. So Valencia in the 96 was very famous for like La Ruta del Bacalao, for like certain clubs that played electronic music in a certain way. So all this like is like a visual cue that's very specific of a time frame in Spain. So the fact that the car has all these lights and it's also funny and it gives you the humor in a non-humorous way. So that like just the car is a very interesting cue. And then we get introduced to the sex workers. The way we as viewers get introduced to these trans sex workers is the same way that Amparo and Valeria get introduced to them. So we get introduced to them from an outsider's standpoint, let's say. So from someone that would be like maybe afraid, maybe they don't want to like cause any trouble to anyone, but is also very intrigued, like from someone from the outside. An easy way for us to get introduced into like the trans sex workers and the survival sex work for the trans feminine people. So yeah, throughout the whole TV show, there are a lot of like little cameos of different people, like a couple of seconds of one, a couple of seconds of another one. For example, the guy that is selling in the street the like the lights and everything, that's one of the Javi's fathers. So yeah. And here is they introduce Paca la Piraña, who is the other like very epic character. She plays herself. So they introduce her the same way that they introduced Veneno. So very epic music, like almost like slow motion, like everything stops. You have the lights from behind, and it's like very epic, but they introduce like a little touch of humor, and because she's wearing this headband with lights and everything, so it's trying to be like very epic, but it's also very humorous. And in the moment that Paca la Piraña opens her mouth, you just understand and you get everything, because the way she speaks is not translatable. The way people in Spain like talk, for someone that is bilingual, I have to explain that like the Spanish language is like so funny, and the way, for example, that you would insult someone is like, I don't know, here maybe you would say me cago en tus muelas, which means I shit on your molars. I'm just gonna give you like a tiny little example of things that she would say, like in the most natural way. She says, for example, there is this little part in the introduction of Paca la Piraña where she says, soy una mujer polaca con el coño atrás como las vacas. Let me translate that for you. That rhymes, okay? Soy una mujer polaca con el coño atrás como las vacas means I am a Polish woman and my pussy is behind, like in the cows. So that's like the normal thing that she would say, and she would talk in this manner, like comparing stuff or making puns, or like all these puns that are genius. And she would use like a very characteristic like Andalusian accent from Almeria, and she would say things that are like very, very specific of a place, and she is so charismatic that it's just unbelievable. So the feeling we are getting with this Paca la Piraña, we know she's like hiding Veneno. And so the feeling we are getting as viewers is that like we're looking for her. Where is she? We're like trying to find Veneno at this point as viewers. Like, I want to see her. I want to see her, because we haven't seen her like clearly really until now. And then we jump to 1996 and we go back to Faela, who we already know, and she's trying to find this story. She just like gets like randomly introduced to Veneno when she was younger. So this is the first time we can really see Veneno. And in this part, this is amazing because this is a scene that we all remember here in Spain. And I'm going to leave the link to this little interview down below because I want you to watch the real one by the real Cristina Ortiz. It is so similar. The way they speak, the way they look, they are, this is like so amazingly similar that it is just like amazing. It's the first time Dana, this actress, has ever acted in any movie or anything in any play. This is her first work. Go watch that video. It is just amazing, amazing. So we get introduced to Veneno again with all like the epicness, the dreaminess, the accuracy. It is very, very accurate, but it's also very funny. It is very humorous because the way that Veneno talks is similar to what I was explaining about Paca la Piraña. So the way she explains things, it's not translatable, but it is so funny and so charismatic that it's just, it gives again all the epicness or something like a dream. And we have like the lights and the fog, just like they've introduced the other characters before, and the funny component as well. And it is like super cool how they are introducing all these characters. So we were like trying to find Veneno in 2006. We found her in 96. And then we go back to 2006. So here the changes between both timelines are a little bit faster. And they're using a song that is neither from 1996 nor from 2006. They choose like La Pared from Cupido, that is like contemporary music right now that would like play. So now like the music is taking us back and we're seeing perfectly both timelines, but we are in the present with the song. So yeah, it's very interesting. We see Faela with her son, and we see all these like 3 different women, and we see like some type of sisterhood forming. We see Valeria, we see Faela with her maternity, even as a cis woman. There's like some sisterhood from all the other like sex workers that were defending her, like leave her alone, let her go. So we have Valeria trying to find La Veneno. We have Veneno as well. So we have all these like 3 female characters and this feeling of sisterhood. So we go back to 96 and we go to the moment where Pepe Navarro sees her, because it's like they give this magic and this like music, because the important moment wasn't like being herself. The important moment was being discovered by Pepe Navarro. They give him this aura of like a genius that would know exactly what would work for TV. And it was not really that, but well, you know, he says immediately, because he was like very hard, I want her here tomorrow. And you have all these like all this scene with Faela and Machus, and they hate each other, but they don't. And you know, the typical like, it's interesting because they're telling like stories about women. So we go like back forward to 2006, and visual cue to understand that it's 2006 is the TV program Aquí hay tomate, which was a TV program that we had like after lunch that talked about like gossip and celebrities and everything like that. And you can see La Veneno in that program, and that you can also like, I'm gonna try to find that link and leave it below. The real one is like very, very similar to the one that we have on TV. So that's like a visual cue. Remember that we were left like trying to find Veneno, and now we see her on TV. The news that they were giving immediately before Veneno was about the health of Rocío Jurado, which was a singer and one of the big divas, like the Spanish singers, like big divas, and she was sick. So that's already another like timeline visual cue, understanding like when did this happen. So they run and they try to find Veneno in this neighborhood just randomly. So Valeria finds Paca las Pirañas' house, and then Veneno really wants to meet her fans. She runs after them, and finally Valeria and Veneno meet in 2006. And there is something like very powerful about this scene, and it's just like the 2 or 3 seconds where Veneno is taking them back home, and she just looks at Valeria like this, and there's like, she recognizes something in that moment, and then she asks the other friend like, are you a cross-dresser? And she says no. So an important thing that you have to understand is that for Veneno, the words like cross-dresser, travesti, transvestite, trans woman, and like the F word are like synonyms for her almost. And that's not correct, but you know, the girl like couldn't almost like read or write. So I know it's not correct, just bear with it. Like just like keep that into consideration. It's not correct. It's how she was raised and how she survived. This scene in Paca la Piraña's house is one of my favorite scenes of the whole episode because photo album, which is like a great way of telling stories from the past, but we can see in a minute the 4 different faces that we're going to have throughout the whole like series for Veneno. We see the real Veneno, we see Yede, this young Veneno, we see the middle Veneno, Dana, and the one holding the album is Isabel, which is the like older Veneno. So it's not only that, it's they recognize who Valeria is, and that feeling of being like recognized, that people like can see through you, is such a like queer specific experience. They knew from the moment they see Valeria that she is a woman, and her best friend Amparo had like absolutely no clue about it. And I love the fact that they have Paca la Piraña there, because what she does is she makes it completely like natural and obvious that she is a trans woman. And then we go back to 96, and they're trying to find Veneno, like Machus and Faela, and they like kidnap her, they put her in a car, and Paca la Piraña just randomly like sits in the car. And what she does is she makes the situation like very normal. What she does is like brilliant in all this epicness. There's always like Paca giving like humor and making things normal, and that is like very 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 powerful. Paca is like this bridge between like 96 and 2006, because she's always like behind there making normal difficult situations and making normal things that aren't always normal. Then they have this conversation, Valeria and her best friend Amparo, who didn't know that Valeria was a trans woman. They have like this awkward conversation, and she says that she sees a very smart girl when she looks at her. And then we have like this little like monologue that Amparo has about Snake and about being trapped in like between 4 walls. And I don't know, I teared up when I watched it, because they also make it like funny and stupid, but it's like very felt and very honest as well. And then we have like a voiceover for that is Valeria reading the paper that she did. She had to do a paper for one of her classes at university, but instead she just explained the thing about Veneno. What she wrote is the voiceover that goes through like different like timelines. Then we go back to 96, and we have Faela knocking on Veneno's door, just like Valeria was knocking on Veneno's door like a couple scenes ago. Then they talk like from person to person. The like wall that was the otherness, that's not there anymore. There's not like them and us right now between Valeria and Veneno, and they see each other just like women for the first time, from like in person, face to face, and they understand each other as women. The wall, that otherness that we had before, is broken. That otherness between like the character of Veneno and Valeria, and the fact that it was her idol and everything, that is broken. They are the same thing. They are trans women, and the like wall of otherness that they had between Faela and El Mississippi and Veneno is also broken because they are like women and they understand like women's issues. And I think that's brilliant, like the mirroring of Valeria's experience and Veneno's experience and Faela's experience, and I think it's just brilliant. Then we go back forward to 2006, and the cue is that Rocío Jurado has died. We can see Paca la Piraña is crying, and she's feeling afraid for Veneno, for her friend. She's seeing that look on her eyes. We still don't know why she went to prison. We still don't know what's going on with her. But now we've been introduced to like the middle Veneno, the one that became very famous, and the old Veneno after prison. We've been introduced to Valeria like pre-coming out. Then we go back to 96, and it took like 2 whole months for them to get Veneno to go on the show. So in the TV show, it looks like it was a lot less time, but she finally gets on the show. But that's not like, that's on the background, but what we see are different scenes or different people with the voiceover of Valeria for that paper that she was writing for her class. What she's saying throughout the whole voiceover is like the intentions that they're setting with the TV show. So what she says is that if there was something where you were being like judgmental before, that now there's going to be empathy, and what was left like in the dark is going to come out like to the light. And it's like this making visible what was invisible. And I think it's very, very exciting when they are showing like all of the sex workers in El Parque del Oeste in these like couches outside watching TV, and they're all like having a good time, and you can really see their personalities, and you're starting to fall in love with all these like trans women sex workers that you have on the show. And they explain that if you don't talk about something, it doesn't exist. And if something doesn't exist, it's going to be marginalized. So the fact that we are telling not only Veneno's story, but all these trans women's story, and the fact that that was something that was left in the dark, talking about survival sex work, talking about like being bullied, being severely abused by your parents, or being like marginalized in 100, that's a very like difficult conversation to have. But now we're going to have empathy for these people. All these stories that are very valuable are going to come out to light, and you're like starting to fall in love with all these like trans women and like sex workers. All this ends up with like the best scene on the episode. That's the last scene, that is just simply Valeria knocking on Veneno's door. That's something normal suddenly, and she like knocks on the door and she tells her name, and she says, "My name is Valeria." I'm crying. I think that was like so beautiful. I think that's like super powerful. There are like a lot of tragic things about this story, and it's going to be very, very, very tragic. But the parts you cry with are these ones. You know what I mean? Like, you cannot not be emotional when you hear her name for the first time, and you hear how normal and how like celebratory they respond, and come here, yeah, we're gonna like have a little party, let's, you know, take out the champagne. Like, yes, yes, yes. So I think that's beautiful. The way they decided to end this episode is with all these intentions that they have, and with like the trans ecstasy, the trans glory, the trans sisterhood, brotherhood, siblinghood. And I think it's like a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful first episode. And the way that the episode finishes is like explaining that all this that was like the little monologue voiceover that we had, that's actually going to become a book, and Valeria is going to write like a book about La Veneno and her experience with La Veneno, which I think is just like a genius way of like introducing what the whole show is going to be about. They've told us like their intentions, they told us what's going to happen. We already know the whole story for like we that were watching it, so there's not going to be like a lot of spoilers. We know it's something like very tragic. they've already set the tone of how useful is the humor going to be, and the emotional part of it, that is a lot about like the sisterhood and feeling seen and being part of something and people understanding you. Like, they've set the tone for this. We know that the emotional part is going to be like the beautiful parts. There's going to be a lot of tragic parts, but the parts that really, really like make you feel something are, you're always like smiling while you're crying. And I think that's one of the most powerful things you can do when you're telling like very tragic stories for marginalized people. Being able like to find that in tragic stories about marginalized people is one of the most powerful things you can do, and was one of the most powerful things in order to explain La Veneno story. So that was all for today. I would really, really appreciate if you guys leave me any questions of any things that maybe you didn't get, or what you think about what I'm talking about. I would love to like answer any questions that you might have. In the future, in the next episodes, I would like to explain a little bit more about the references. Please check the links down below that I'm going to leave for like context purposes. And if you want to follow me, you can follow me on my Twitter. I'm going to leave my personal Instagram in case you're interested, or you can subscribe right here. I'm going to leave my PayPal down below as well. I really appreciate the people that send me some money. It's really, really, really appreciated. Thank you very much to Abdullah, for example, that's always supported me. Apple of my eye. You do not understand how much I struggle and how much I appreciate it. So thank you very, very much. So I'll be back with episode number 2. I hope all you guys can come with me to watch the whole thing because I love it very much. Stay queer. I love you.